Thanks very much, Molly, for that great introduction. I am here today with Kevin Muñoz. As many of you know, we here at the Nolan Consulting Group are very interested in making sure that we're staying on top of the latest reading and cultural material that's out there. Kevin was responsible for our book group's latest book selection, Reset, How to Change What's Not Working by Dan Heath, which I actually felt like as an operational person, this book was like gold. Maybe that's why it's yellow. But so Kevin and I are here today to talk a little bit about this because it is such an important topic for all of us to not get stuck, right?
Yeah, no, totally. And I'm excited to be here. I am, as they say, a longtime listener, first-time caller. And it's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to cover this book. This was a book that I felt was right in the economy that we're in, reset economy. There's nothing like it. There is not a chapter that I don't read, and I don't think about a process or system that it's something that we're involved in.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah, and I should have said that. Welcome, Kevin's first appearance on the podcast. We're so excited to have him here and a voice and many podcasts to come, right? You've got a great podcast voice. Is that when, I guess if I could just start with one thing on an operational level, as far as this book is concerned, as I said, would highly recommend it. The structure of this book is so powerful, right? And that's when you talk about going through each chapter and finding something that was meaningful, like I did. I mean, it is not hyperbole to say that. I kept like stopping in the moment and being like, wow, that would be something that we should apply.
Yeah,
should do it.
Right. I mean, the book takes you through a lot of different examples. And for those who don't know, Dan Heath, I mean, he's a classic, one of the big giants with all the business development and this, Made to Stick. That's a big book. Came out, I know, in 2007, I believe.
Right.
And Switch with his brother Chip, I believe as well. So, I mean, the whole book, I felt that each chapter, although we're talking about systems and we're talking about your business, are applied to a lot of our own personal, things that aren't working ourselves. And another thing that resonated with me with the book Reset is that it is something that I particularly enjoy every time there's a moment to reset something. A fresh start is always really fun. There's a lot of energy behind it.
Oh, yeah.
So much potential.
Oh, yeah.
I felt like it was the perfect book for our book club. And so I say we dive right in and let's chat a little bit about overall takeaways from this book. What were some takeaways that, if you only had 30 seconds to tell somebody about this book, what would you say?
Oh my gosh. Only 30 seconds, Kevin? I'm a high eye. I can't do that.
45 seconds?
45 seconds. You know what? I think I'm going to go back to that overall structure where I started. The overall structure of this book is such that you can pick it up, look at the title listings, identify an area where you want to make some changes and go right to that chapter. The chapter itself is so very well laid out. There are a lot of really great stories from across industries, by the way. I think that's something that I always appreciate when I am approaching a book, that it's not just told from the business perspective. There's education in here. There's not-for-profit organizations in here. So really across the board. So if I had to take a skill, I would be hard-pressed to choose a skill. But my major takeaway was really this book is something that you can pick up and put down depending upon what you need and when you need it. You don't have to read it from start to finish, although I would recommend that. You don't have to read it from start to finish because there's just great content in each chapter.
Yeah, and I mean, this is something that I think of an example that will apply. I can easily go back to one chapter, get their main takeaways, and reinforce what I'm trying to do. For me, the overall message from this book was it focuses on the small little changes that we can do immediately when we face down something we really want to change that might be really large, or it might seem like it's too big to fix. It makes it so we can start tomorrow instead of, let's make that a next year problem.
Right.
And I think right now we are in a moment, tis the season of planning for next year and budgeting for next year, when some of these things we can look at our current systems and just start now.
Right. Go and see the work. That was the first chapter, right? Go and see the work. And I come from a retail background. I come from, Borders, Books, and Music, which had 3 sort of distinct business lines when I started. It ended up adding a 4th business line. But the whole idea was, as a bookseller, I'm selling books. And as a barista, I'm pulling espresso. As a music seller, I'm only interested in, lay downs and what's happening, on Tuesday. The reality of it is, in order to make effective change as a leader or as a person just interested in making sure that you're doing things right in an organization, is you got to go and see it. And so in an organization like the businesses that we work with, where you might have a painting business and a carpentry arm and, a division that does power washing. If you're in remodeling, you might be doing flooring. You might have cabinets that you're looking to install. Like, all of these things are different kinds of work. And I'm not suggesting that you go out there and become so intrinsically good at it that you could do the work yourself. But as a leader, are you looking at it often enough to say, wow, we've got an opportunity to make some improvements here that we're not done yet? We should do that.
Yeah, I mean, especially for a leader, if you are recognizing, if you're getting the hints that a current system you're operating under is not working, going in and seeing the work, being on the front lines with everyone who's doing the work, this is where you're going to get the most return and clues necessary for you to, okay, now I'm aware of this. I have a deeper understanding of what might the challenge be or what the reset is necessary for.
Right.
And so, I think they reference in the book this, I'm blanking on the name now, but the Toyota process, where you just have to be involved. And this gets, as a leader, motivation from your team if you're there trying to experience this change or the system that you're trying to really understand.
Oh, yeah. Like, let's be clear, when you're a business owner, sometimes you're delegating that process, right? You're saying to a field supervisor, go out there, job costing results aren't showing what they need to show. So I'd like you to take a couple of days and go out there and really do a real good field audit and make sure that you're seeing what it is that they're doing. Does achieve 2 things. First of all, you've got your field supervisor engaged in a project. You're delegating. Love that. But also, the team shows the team that you respect and care enough about what they're doing to see it, and that's a culture boon, right? Yeah. I mean, that's like culture gold.
How did this book change the way you see challenges at work or, with clients? Like, how did it shape the approach for you?
I think that in a lot of cases, clients come to us with an expectation that we're going to give them huge, big nuggets of solid, good advice or processes, and it's going to change their world forever. But I think what this highlighted for me is that it's repetition, and it is the small decisions. It's looking at each piece and recognizing it for what it is and making changes when you need to make the change instead of, like you said, why wait until January 1st? Make the change now that's necessary. So I think that was really something that I felt like I would start to communicate more with clients that, I know you're asking me for the silver bullet. I know that what you want is a silver bullet, but, sometimes you do just need to go out there and measure production rates and make sure that your production rates are matching your sales rate and that your sales team is selling a job that your field can produce. Sometimes it is that simple. And don't get me wrong, I know that all of those things that I just mentioned those are not simple things, but sometimes the answer is simple. Sometimes it is just look at it and measure it and figure it out and figure out where you're going wrong, because that's usually what's happening.
Yeah, he highlights the necessity of following the understanding, the systemic understanding versus the functional understanding. Maybe middle management will have a functional understanding of a system, but it isn't until you do spend more time, dive in a little deeper, have to be present for the entire process, I mean, we do this as a company process. We go and map everything out. It's funny, like in the book, he talks about, asking people their basic understanding on how a bike functions, or if they can remember how a bike works.
I love that picture.
And you get people who say, oh yeah, well, I know exactly how a bike works. I mean, I think I also know how a bike works.
You get on, you pedal, you go.
Yeah. And then you ask them to, all right, well, now draw the bike, how, and then you get images of, the bike not being able to turn, the pedals not moving anything. And it just highlights that maybe there's times as upper management, middle management, where we do have an understanding, a functional understanding of a system, but we need to be at a deeper level, and that's a systemic understanding.
Right. And it's sort of copying in on that. When you can go in and you can draw out the system, when you can actually get a complete picture, it also allows you to understand where it is that you can eliminate waste. And sometimes I think we tend to think of waste as being something that's actually tangible. I'm not ordering paint appropriately, or we're ordering too much lumber, or whatever it might be tangible, or we think of it as being tangible.
Something that stuck out to me, and it's, hearing issues that contractors have, having done a lot of workshops and speaking to contractors all over the country that have very similar problems, is that this book really helps frame, when you do run into a failure, if you want to call it a failure, a reframe where instead, do we patch this up? Is this broken, or is this a good time for us to kind of rethink what we're doing?
Right.
And it helps you not, find failures and focus on failures and focus on change, because there is the other big part of this book, which is bright spots.
Yeah.
Identifying bright spots. Why focus on failures when you can just find what is working, double down on that, and replicate it in different systems? One thing that I'm very used to in our culture here at Nolan Consulting Group is after every event, after every workshop, after every whatever it is that we're hosting with our clients, we do an after action review. We go see what was it that we aimed to do, and what was something that worked, because then we will aim to replicate the success, and that success will compound, and it'll get us to a result.
I'm so glad you say that, because I think oftentimes when I'm talking about an after action report or review with clients, I think that their assumption often is that nothing went wrong on the job, or nothing went wrong there. And I'm thinking, no, I want to know what went right so we can reproduce it. And so don't get me wrong, I would recommend it in any case, because if something went wrong, it should be fresh in the moment, and you should be able to dissect it and understand what went wrong so you can fix it. But really, I want to know what went right. I want a client to know that if they've turned in a job and it was an overnight crew and they killed it on the gross profit front and they don't know why, then how can you sell it again? So I want those bright spots to be identified early and often so that a client can reproduce it. So thanks for bringing that up. That was great. I forgot about that.
Yeah, no, the psychological impact of not always focusing on failures. We do have successes or things that work very well, and we shouldn't be afraid to double down on those. And reproduce as much as we can.
Absolutely.
And so another question for you, Kathryn, is is there a process or a system that this book made you think of in regards to your clients, with your clients?
Yeah. So actually, there's two answers there.
I'll
start with the client-forward one. I think that this, so reading this book was like reading through the reasons why Brian talks about documenting your process. And I'm almost feeling like this book is a natural sort of outcome of the document your process. And so I would say to anybody who maybe doesn't see the value in doing that kind of work, read the book and you'll see why it is that you should do it. Because going through and understanding everything that occurs from the moment your phone rings to the moment that you collect your final check and who's involved along the ways serves a couple of purposes. First of all, in our changing technology world, you might be able to identify areas where you can create efficiencies because somebody somebody is doing something that you could do, you could use Zapier for, or you could go in and you could, use whatever AI platform you might be working with and simplify something. But also, you want a continuous improvement scenario. Like, look at it every year, look at it every 6 months. You don't know where somebody's training may have broken down. And as a result, you've sort of muddied the waters and like that. But I will tell you that also, I'm also in my role here as a director of operations. As you mentioned before, we not only are client forward in terms of coaching people and working with them on their numbers and their processes and their 90-day plans, but we have a lot of sort of insular work that we're doing as well. And I loved that go and see the work thing. And it's funny because I was reading this chapter, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago. And in my head, I was thinking, Colin is a part of the management team here. He does a really great job of sort of challenging the status quo and saying, is that necessary? And I appreciate that, right? And it always makes me stop and think, is it necessary to do that? Are we overproducing? Are we creating roadblocks? But one of the things that he talks about in the book is, send somebody in who maybe isn't a part of the process to observe. And I thought, well, I think that Colin should do this for a couple of months or, a couple of weeks, maybe come in and sit through the meetings and see how it is that we're operating. A fresh set of eyes is really a good thing. And it just so happened that as I was thinking that, and I'm not exaggerating, as I was thinking that, Colin literally called me. And so it was the first thing I said to him. I was like, I'm reading this book, because he's, of course, part of our book group as well. I'm reading this book and I've got to this chapter and I really think that this is something that we should do in, January or February. And, I'll take some client phone calls for you in order to sort of balance it. And you come in and you observe.
So it's that reallocation of resources, right? Like you have a finite amount of resources. You have, first off, importantly, energy behind a wanting to reset something, right? So you have that energy and you want to not have it go to waste. You want to take advantage of the momentum you have. And then you need to allocate the resources to make sure this happens. And so by being flexible like this, where, hey, in order for this to happen, I'm going to need some support on this end, because ultimately, and something that the book really handles, is there are a lot of factors. And if we begin to tug at one, we then realize how interconnected systems are. And when we aim to use your example, materials, you want to reduce some waste. Okay, how does that down the line impact production, operations, the employee experience? And so, I think it's the culture element to it, but also realizing those moments and figuring out what resources do I have? Because not everybody will be like, okay, that's a great idea. Let's spend $20,000 on that and let's see what happens. But it is working with what you have. And once you do have that buy-in, once you do have energy behind it, it's go all in and see these changes, implementations, whatever it is, as experiments. That's another takeaway from the book, that all these changes can seem, or you might internally think, I have a lot of things I want to change in my business. I see it on onboarding calls. I ask, what are you using for tech? And often I get the response, but then I get the story as to why they're looking for something else.
Right.
And it sounds like it's a heavy decision to make, but I think taking it and applying the lens of, this is an experiment, this is not the final say, will make the process easier. It might make the adoption process faster. But that's one thing that the team, I think we're fortunate. But again, we've been consuming Dan Heath and the Heath brothers content for a while.
We love these kinds of books, so we're sort of primed for it. But you're right. I think sometimes, decisions like what technology to use, or, it does seem overwhelming to make a decision here. But I think, he talks about that. One of his chapters is do less and do more. And, I love that idea of making sure that you are prioritizing your high value work. And so sometimes you might look at a $30,000 or a $40,000 investment in a piece of technology, or maybe it's $15,000 in the technology and $25,000 for the implementation package. You look at that and you're like, okay, that's an expense, and I don't know that I can afford that expense. And my thought is, how can you not? that $25,000 is going to prevent your team from being distracted. If they're not distracted, they're not making mistakes. If they're not making mistakes, you're not going to lose money because you've misordered stuff, or you've not scheduled correctly, or you've, like, I think about all of the opportunity here because of a notion that you're going to save money. So I want you to prioritize that kind of stuff. As a coach, I want you to think about if your team is, a really, really high-end company, if what they're doing is really beautiful work, why would you take them out to do something that's less profitable or less meaningful for the client? Let's get them doing that stuff. Go out there and make money,
exactly.
Right?
That's what it's all about. Talking about resetting and changes, what are some of the mental barriers that you've encountered? I mean, you mentioned right now with like money being one of them, or like a budget. They view it with the lens of only as an expense and not the functions they'll gain from it, the value they'll gain from it. Other than that, which I think is one thing we can all relate to. What other barriers keeps leaders from resetting sooner?
I think change is scary. And I think, with the advent of, artificial intelligence and learning, what's the LM? Learning machines?
Language models?
I'm getting it wrong. But in any case, it's scary to people what this unknown can be. And I'm not even talking about adopting technology here. I think that, you came up in a business where you are working in a family business and you know that change needs to be made, but you've maybe got an old guard who's resistant to doing that. Or what's gotten you here has been really good, and so why rock the boat? So I think in a lot of cases, it's actually just fear of change and what would change do. And I guess maybe as far as that's concerned, I'm a creature of comfort. I want things to stay the same. Yeah. I want my Mondays to be the same Mondays every Monday. But I don't know, the idea of going in and running through what Dan talks about in this book and sort of identifying in each chapter, he's identifying some skills. That's actually fun and exciting. And so, yes, as a creature of habit, I want to stay here and I want to do the things that we've always done. I think it's exciting to do it. So I would say to those people who are afraid of that kind of change that, it's coming. You can either get on board or, it can pass you by.
Yeah, I mean, like you're saying, with the advancement of technologies now, that the rate of it is pretty fast. It does ultimately require adaptation. And that's why the culture, if we are always looking for the bright spots to replicate, if we are always willing to take a step back and look at a failure as a hint that maybe a system needs updating. One thing the book highlights is how some issues today or some problems today might have been solutions in the past, right? Like, because we encounter issues and we sort of patch it and trug along, we play whack-a-mole with the problems,
right.
Instead of just being like, hey, hold on, let's take the time to find the leverage point to make that change. So in the book, where the reset can happen, the reset button, it's really identifying that leverage point, that the smallest action you can take that has the biggest impact.
Right.
I think this is a huge component in, the big rocks that we do. It's okay. We identified what the overall big priority that once complete will allow a lot of the day-to-day tasks to fall into place. And if it's a big rock that we're giving ourselves, say, 3 months to tackle, how are we identifying those leverage points, and then how much pressure do we know that we need to apply so we don't exhaust the team, so we don't overwhelm the team, but we also want it to be meaningful because we're spending energy on it.
Right. I'm glad you brought that up. I think oftentimes, certainly when we're talking in a planning session with a client, everybody's excited to be there. Everybody thinks they can get their work done by next week. And, our obligation is to sort of say, okay, wait a minute. Like, are you really, there's 12 to-dos here. Are you really going to get everything done by next week? Being really good at identifying what that constraint is. Okay, so if we're talking about developing a learning pathway for a salesperson and ensuring that as we scale, we've got a system to move salespeople through, what's that one constraint at the beginning that's preventing us from doing it? And you work on that diligently, and you work on getting the right amount of time and the right resources and the right level of expertise. And that one little pinch point then can flow in. Because, if you've got a training program for your field people, you likely have a structure for training people. You now just need that one little piece, right? So, I think it's important to stop, weigh the enthusiasm and excitement of the people who are in the planning room and are so excited that they know that they can get it all done next week. And then, of course, reality hits and there's a scheduling problem and the snow starts falling, whatever. But if we can be really good at saying, okay, what's going to prevent us from getting this done? What's the one thing? And then let's get a target due date and work back from that. I mean, that's resetting at its finest, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you were hitting on a lot of things. I didn't know where to tackle it first. So one is, like looking back, there was another podcast that Dan was on, and he mentioned how, we look at goals. Sometimes we start off by looking backwards, then they move forwards. So an example he gave was, we've all been there. We want to check our figure. We want to lose some weight. At first, we're counting how many pounds we are losing. And then once we're getting close and approaching, it's how many we have left. So it's sort of subtracting.
Right.
And that sort of frame of mind is what helps us maintain energy. We're seeing progress happen. But another, I think, bigger point here is a lot of these changes. So first of all, changes, often the biggest catalyst is a crisis, right?
Yeah.
Something happens and we need to act. There's no debating it. We have to address it. What he is saying is you don't have to wait for a crisis.
You don't.
He uses the example with Chick-fil-A and how they managed to, and as a big Chick-fil-A goer myself, I have witnessed this where, this drive-thru experience is very different than the rest. Because as soon as I pull up to the parking lot, there's someone at my door, telling me it's a pleasure to talk to me. And that was just basically what you're saying, tackling the constraint. They met, what's one constraint? Okay, we need to double the menus. Then it's, okay, we have a new bottleneck, which is we only have 2 menus. Then it was, okay, let's just make people go out with the cars and go in line with them. And, they go in detail with the book with how all the steps that Chick-fil-A was doing, but it wasn't a crisis. It's not like Chick-fil-A was going under, they were the worst drive-through processing fast food restaurants. They were simply wanting to be better. And so they found each bottleneck and addressed them, because as soon as you resolve one, sometimes you can create, more orders. Now we're backed up on in the kitchen. And so it's intentional. But yes, it's not always to wait for that crisis moment.
I always think about the unintended consequences for anybody who's traveled in the last couple of years, right? The airline started charging money for you to check your bag. And so now everybody drags it through security, get to the gate, and they check it at the gate. And so airlines thought that they were going to be saving money because they were charging and they didn't have to have as many people at the front end to be taking bags as soon as you arrived at the airport. Now they have to have more people at the door. And that creates a physical barrier to you getting on the plane, because now you got all these suitcases sitting on the gang. What is it? The entrance to the plane.
Yeah, the gate.
I love that solution. And I can actually remember the first time that I arrived at the Chick-fil-A and it was dinner time, and the sun was wintertime, so it was probably almost dark. And like you come up and you're seeing all of those red lights, and I'm literally thinking to myself, I think what he may have talked about when he drove up to it the first time. Like I drove up and I saw those red lights and I thought, I am out of here. Like I am going to go pick up a rotisserie chicken from the grocery store, and that's what we're going to have. And that movement was so quick and brilliant because somebody stopped and thought outside of a crisis, this needs to change. So I would challenge you as a business owner and as a leader in your organization, what is happening? We're going to have Tiffany Bova come to our Grand Summit. We're so excited by that. We read The Experience Mindset. Also book. An amazing book. Great book. And at what point are you creating a system that favors a customer or creating a system that favors the employee without thinking about the whole experience? And as a result, you've created chaos. So I love that. I love the idea. And really that's why we would advocate for a planning session with your team, because then you are not waiting for, the proverbial crap to hit the fan. You're actually sitting down and you're saying, what are our bottlenecks? I think we do X good. And then you hear from the field, you know what? we don't think that that's how it works.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's a planning 101. You don't ignore a planning session because there's nothing going on or nothing going wrong. You have a planning session to prevent things from going wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And to get, we're talking a lot about leadership, and we've mentioned how it's great to get others involved, and the more you can, being there in the front lines with the people doing the work, a lot can be revealed to us. Chapter 10, letting people drive. This was it's hard to say which chapter I like the most, but this is one of them that I really like because
I brought my visuals because this way I could see all the chapters at the same time.
Yeah. And I brought my laptop.
And that's a generation thing, I think.
Yeah, maybe. But I like that print. I'm going to ask for it to be framed.
Oh, there you go.
But yeah, like getting your people involved because, it's talked about change being scary, being difficult to get momentum on. And what I really enjoyed about this chapter in particular was, so I am, a little known fact about me, a hobby that is not, archery. It was my my COVID
that's awesome.
interest. We're all sitting home. What do?
Right.
I somehow found out
I'm going to shoot arrows.
And so they talk about this Olympic coach who is training and has difficulty training, and ultimately just to for time. He talks about the process of the coaching where you really, once you give people the autonomy to make changes the way that they are perceiving the change happen. So in the example with archery, instead of being like, okay, you need to hold it this way, your muscle should be engaged, this muscle needs to be engaged, you got to pull back here, this is the correct posture. On the outside could look correct, but inside you could be feeling completely wrong.
Right.
Like this is not the right way for me to do it. I might understand where you're coming from, but I feel like this other aspect of my training is more important because I think this is what's really my barrier. Mm-hmm. And so in this book, as you're going through resets and as you're getting people ignited and motivated, is letting them take the wheel, letting them sort of find their way and coming with an innovative idea, letting them really exercise their motivation, their creativity, because it's really difficult to assume that the way we are addressing it is the right way for that individual.
Well, I think that it's for when I'm thinking about this from this place, the assumption is as leaders in an organization, you know what's best for the team, and so you're going to make a decision that they're going to act on. But sometimes you want to get the team involved in what that solution is, and you want to hear from their perspective. Listen, when I'm thinking about a SWOT. Strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. When I'm talking about a SWOT with a client, I want them to involve people from the different disciplines because that way you're hearing from them what they think is good or not. And so when you get to this let people drive place, you want them to be involved and engaged. Mm-hmm. You want them to be comfortable making a suggestion, even if ultimately you don't work on it.
Yeah.
Because that gives you confidence that the decisions that you are making are going to be implemented.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because it's maybe easy to say, okay, it's this way, you got to do it that way, you got to do it this way. That, I can't think of anything stronger that can kind of take away motivation.
Right.
And so you're working with them, not to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's, we're leading a team, implementing things from the top down is important, but the ones doing the work of the work, being allowed to use their own motivation, their own creativity is going to allow, the actual accountability to
Absolutely.
go up, rather than, expecting the result that lives in your mind and, forcing it upon others.
Right. I can almost guarantee when I'm working with a client and they are making unilateral decisions that they are pushing down without any involvement from anybody in the field, that the results are not going to be good. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that they're going to be horrible because if you come from the field, maybe you have some special insight. I am, however, saying that unilateral decision-making, authoritative kind of decision-making, it's not where people are these days. So I would recommend that you're getting more people in there.
So finally, how would you summarize this with maybe someone who is going through a moment? You as a coach are probably able to pinpoint these reset moments very, a little bit easier. And you wanted to give somebody a framework to go off of, the framework that this book offers. Right. What is this core framework that Heath is getting at with reset?
So what I think, like finding your constraints, finding your leverage points, he talks a lot about, and there's some great illustrations in the book itself, leverage points. And, if you've ever imagined moving a huge boulder and you don't have the appropriate fulcrum, you're never going to move it. So finding those leverage points, taking the time to find them, whether you yourself are going in and observing a system that you haven't seen before, or whether you are sending somebody else in who is maybe the appropriate authority there, like I was talking earlier, sending a field supervisor, but then restocking your resources and really paying attention to how things are being used within the business. So, eliminating waste, making sure that you are shifting your resources and that you're doing high value work. All of those things are going to make your business better. And they're two fairly simple ideas. Find those leverage points and make sure that you're appropriately using your resources.
Yeah. It sounds easy. Like, I mean, that was a great summary because it's easy to say, well, of course, I'll just stop doing the thing that it's not working. But
right. All right. You're right.
but the thing is, it's not first always abundantly clear, like where is the bottleneck? Where is the obstacle? What is disrupting the system? And then two is the amount of pressure that you apply to this change when the timing feels right. A question: when you encounter someone who has they're having some issue with their team, or they're having problems with production, when is a good time to say, okay, this is just a slight reset we need to have in the system, or it is a larger change that like now it's more, maybe it's gonna be more involved.
So I'm maybe like tipping my cards here. I'm probably a little bit more urgent. And I would say the time is now. The time is now to do it, whether it's a small reset or whether it's a bigger system-wide reset. I think the only time in the industries that we work in where I would not advocate for like pulling people out of the field and doing all this. I mean, what's your busy season? And if it's June, July, August, maybe don't do it then.
I see.
But by and large, if you've got a problem, I want to diagnose it, get a solution soon. I think we're coming up on a pretty lucky time of year because we do work with businesses in the trades. Most businesses have some seasonality that falls around the end of the year, the beginning of the year, whether it's holidays or whether it's weather. It could be or a combination of the both, right? And so we are coming up on a period of time where I would really, really strongly advocate for, okay, so if you're laying your team off because you're a landscaper and it's going to be cold soon, like let's maybe pull them in for a day or two of review of how the jobs went this year and what they thought worked well and what they thought was a problem before you lay them off. So I think we're lucky that we're going into that time of year, but I mean, I think that when you wait too long, problems compound.
Yeah.
And that can cost you some money.
Yeah.
Spend it now, spend a little now, save a lot later.
So something that I wanted to, that you highlighted was the natural rhythm that, a lot of our clients being in the trades, there's a natural rhythm where we have moments of resetting. Although the aim should be, always have that open mind, always be identifying your bright spots when things seem to be going okay, but there are natural moments in the in the year where we can maybe go a little deeper and have a structured plan around the big changes we want to implement for the following year, for the next quarter. It's something that for me, this is an ongoing living practice of resetting, but there are times that especially are really good because they allow for flexibility.
They do.
Maybe you have more resources. The most important resource is time. When things start slowing down, there's more time to maybe spend on a company process, more time to study which software or tool will be best for your team. And so, like you said, if it is the peak season and you're a little stretched on manpower, is knowing, okay, when can you be proactive with identifying these changes and always being on your feet to have a quick reset when you are super busy, when clients are the phones are ringing off the hook, and you still need to address those because you said a small minor thing can blow up into a bigger problem.
Right.
If we don't address our review process or getting our reviews, and we're missing good opportunity there, or if there was maybe an unfavorable review and we don't have a process in place to how to manage those, consequences can be expensive, both money and just reputation and all.
Yeah. What so something I might recommend in those instances is a parking lot for ideas that you need to have conversation around, but you're maybe not going to be having a conversation around sooner. Set it up as a Google Doc. Maybe it's a big I know you probably have all of your whiteboards in your office are devoted to scheduling, but choose a corner of one where you're just writing down things that you need to have a conversation around. Not urgent yet. Mm-hmm. They probably will be urgent at some point in the future. So you're writing them down there so that when you do have that precious commodity of time, you can have the right conversation around them. Mm-hmm. That's the worst thing, is when you have a planning session and you've forgotten to talk about something because it wasn't written down. Mm-hmm. So highly recommend that.
What's like an advice? So I have an advice, and maybe I can go first.
You go first.
So like when you have that realization, you have that epiphany of, okay, I identified my leverage, my leverage point. I know what it is that I need to do. I am a little busy, and I'm not sure if now is a good time, if I should wait until there's a better moment. I would always recommend, and this is how I operate, internally myself, is when there's a burst, when there's a burst of energy around it, I full on go dive into it, because I know that there's times where it does cost more energy for me to get to a project or to get to something. And I know that if I'm handed a project that at the moment it sparks my motivation, I don't want to let that go to waste. The flow will be easier. The work will come out much easier. Now, this is, time management. You have to make sure you don't abandon everything else. What I'm getting here is knowing the team and knowing who has a lot of energy behind a change is not letting that go to waste.
Oh, right.
We talked about it earlier with Colin when he realized something from this book that he wanted to implement. He didn't want to waste time. You jumped right in and were like, okay, well, in order for this to happen, I'm going to have to take on some of your load so we can get there. What other advice, if someone is ready, that you want to ensure that they doesn't go missed? Yeah.
I think, so this is where a little bit of self-reflection needs to come into play. You know that about yourself. I would say I probably work with a handful of business owners who are constantly being diverted by shiny lures, and maybe those bursts of energy on things that they think are problems maybe could be focused on things that actually are problems. So part of it is a little self-awareness.
Yeah.
And a little bit of like, maybe this is where I would say, this is self-serving. Talk about it with your coach. Like talk about it with your coach. Talk about it with people in your world, your informal advisors, people within your business. Sometimes something that you feel is immediate and needs your immediate attention could be a distraction. And you want to be very careful that you're weighing that appropriately. So I would say, know yourself and what you're prone to. You know that you need to take advantage of that burst. Some people might need to say, I actually have to sit on this for 48 hours, because if I act on it now, it's going to consume me for weeks, and I'm not going to get the other things on my plate done.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's true. It is a double-edged sword, this burst, right? Because we can double down, and there's other things that are important that we should be on top of and should be getting to. So it can be dangerous when you do have that burst. It's about harnessing it and like knowing that being reasonable with the time that you're allocating to it, being reasonable with the resources that you're allocating to it. But it is something that as a leader, if there are members of the team that have that burst, letting them drive, letting them do it, follow up.
Oh yeah.
And as the leader, ensuring that all the other to-dos, all the other tasks are being met, but to not shy away from, all right, there's a lot of energy behind this, but let's settle down. Let's get focused. I think taking advantage of the moment and really going into identifying the analysis, the building of the new system is something that would strongly recommend.
Absolutely. As a leader, right, I'm all about enthusiasm and engagement, and I'd rather I'd rather trade on that energy than try to get somebody to motivated when when they're not feeling it. So I'm going to trade on that all the time. But that's me as a leader and how I understand. So part of it is just knowing who you are.
So, Kathryn, final thoughts on Reset. What do you say?
Well, I would say you should go out and get this book right away. I'm going to advocate for the hardcover here. I mean, you can see my little flags. I love the little flags. I'm going to advocate for the hardcover because there are a lot of illustrations in here and some tables that I think are worth looking at, and they're worth the printed form. Yeah. Or if you're reading it on on a tablet or a device, you could see it. So might be something that I would say pick that up instead of listening to it.
Yes.
But in any case, I love the structure of the book. I like the way the chapters are organized. I like the summary at the end of each chapter. So when you're preparing for your podcast, you can go back and take a look and you can get immediately caught up. But I think that it's one of those things. And for my operationally minded friends out there, I've actually already recommended this book like probably a half a dozen times this past coaching week. For my operationally minded friends, pick it up. You need it.
Yeah, no, definitely. One thing that I realized a little too late, and it would have been helpful for our book club, is that there is actually a guide for book clubs in this book, and I that's what you get when you just simply listen. I listen to the book multiple times, and a lot of good nuggets of information constantly. But having the physical copy, seeing the diagrams, I think it's huge to be able to visually see what is being explained. Yeah. Like I said, having the guide for book clubs, if anybody here listening is thinking about a book to propose, there's a good guide in there, all the recaps for the chapters, and it made me want to go into a lot of the other. It's a strong organizational psychology book, so there's a lot of industries that are not related to the trades, but if you think about it, we're all operating in systems.
Absolutely. And
we're all ready and need to reset them every now and then. Yeah. I think it's a great book, whether you listen, whether you read, whether you have it read too.
Whether you only listen to the podcast.
Whether you only listen to the podcast. This is a great book. I hope to recommend it more in my on my life when I encounter people who need a reset both in their work and in their life. And it's a great book. Kathryn, thank you very much for having me on here.
Oh, Kevin, it was a pleasure. I always love to discuss books, and so I think it's fun to do this. I appreciate that we were able to do it. And Molly, thank you for having us. And if anybody has any questions about us as the Nolan Consulting Group, please reach out. We're always happy to have conversations with people who want to learn more about us.
Yeah, thank you.